Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Career Coaches Insights webinar with Mollie Stephens for her session on Influence Matters, Tools for Managing Up, Across, and Down. My name is Amy Rueda, and I serve as Senior Executive Director for Professional Programs and Services and your host for today's webinar. For some general webinar housekeeping, we will have time at the end of our program for Q&A with our speaker. So please use the Q&A function to submit your questions below. We will be recording the event and we'll send the recording out once it becomes available. Now, to start our program, I am so excited to introduce you to Mollie Stephens. Mollie is the founder and CEO of Matter Collaborative, a coaching, therapy, and consulting practice dedicated to supporting social change and mission-driven professionals. Through Matter Collaborative, she offers therapy, coaching, and consulting to design and facilitate transformational sessions for hundreds of mid and senior level leaders, helping them shift mindsets, clarify their impact, and achieve their goals. Mollie draws on a career spanning direct service, policy, and organizational leadership, including over a decade at the Lee Group, a national executive search and staffing company, where she most recently led a team of 19 staff running workshops, developing resources, and supporting 900 plus coaching clients annually. She also serves as a lecturer at UCLA's Luskin School of Public Affairs, teaching about public affairs careers to graduate students. Mollie is driven by the deep belief that there is a sustainable way for every person to make the world a better place. Mollie lives in North Carolina with her husband, daughter, and cat. She holds a dual MSW/MPP from UCLA, a bachelor's from Cornell University, and is a licensed clinical social work associate and IFC PCC candidate. In today's session, Mollie will share strategies to, one, identify where influence feels stuck, draining, or maybe unclear in your current role. How to strengthen clarity and alignment with teams and stakeholders. How to navigate and influence across differences in identity, authority, and access. How to apply simple tools to manage across peers without formal authority. And finally, how to commit to one concrete step that will increase your impact this week. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mollie.
Thank you, Amy. It is so wonderful to be here. We're gonna have some fun today. Let me get my slides up and running. And we'll get rolling. Thank you, first of all, to UCLA for having me. It is a pleasure to be with my Bruin community from across the country, especially on this kind of dreary day. I'm imagining your sunshine over yonder. Um, we are here to talk about influence. I'm going to give you some tools. Hopefully, we are going to have some fun. I know that some folks in the room are my current or former students. So if you are a student of mine, or if we were classmates, or if we've worked together, please say hi in the chat so I can get excited seeing my people here. And we're going to jump into it. I am used to being a very interactive facilitator, so I hope that we will have a lively chat today. And I have a bunch of different elements to hopefully spark your thinking and also give you a lot to walk away with. And we will definitely have time for Q&A at the end. So to start us off, you all came here today because something about influence sparked your interest. So let's talk about why the content that I'll share today matters. And so I'd love to invite you in the chat, for those of you who can safely do so, not if you're driving a vehicle, to please share a word or three in the chat about why influence matters. Why is this important? And I will lift them up as I see them, so that those who are looking elsewhere can hear what's coming in the chat. So share in the chat a few words about why influence matters. Influence matters because it can positively or negatively impact others' lives, matters for visibility, gets things done, creates change, can lead to action, for trust, to get work done. Awesome. To build community and collaboration. Great. Here is why influence matters at the global scale. I thought that this was a really timely topic to bring to you all as we are in the midst of a big shift in how we work within organizations and how people use AI. I read a really powerful report. There's lots of speculation about what is to come in the workforce as a result of AI, but I think what I believe is that we are preparing for a reshaping and restructuring of the structures in which people support work. And so collaboration and influence will become even more important. As you see in this quote here, we may do less repetitive tasks. And so we increase then the value of creative, strategic, and ethical decision making. You can be the most skilled person or competent person, or you can have the most skilled and competent AI bot out there, but if you don't have relational influence, you will really struggle with success and satisfaction to be able to move things forward. And of course, the other kind of subheading of why influence matters is because there's drama at work. We work with people, we're humans. And so being able to exercise influence helps cut through some of that noise. So I wanted to kind of start with the why does influence matter headline, capital letters. Out in the world. But then I want to invite us to think about why does influence matter to me, to you all? And some of your initial answers pointed towards that. But take a second and see if this changes when I change the question to why does influence matter to me? And I again invite you in the chat to put a word or three about why influence matters to you. And then I'm going to tell you about why influence matters to me. And I will again read them off. So, influence matters to feel that I'm effective, to help my community. I feel unheard when I don't have some influence. Influence matters, success with less effort, and others less talented and more influence can get ahead, right? Influence matters to me because it helps me build relationships, cuts through the noise. So I hope thinking about it from these two different angles warms your brain up for some of the tools and stories that I'm going to introduce here. Um, Now let me tell you a little bit about why influence matters to me. Influence is really at the heart of my work, which is about having interpersonal impact. I think a lot about my values and my purpose. And the interpersonal has always been at the center of my work, even when I'm working in the policy space. And I think you can see that probably from how I'm even designing this session. Like I want to connect with you all. Um, and so people-centered work is at the center of everything I do within Matter Collab. So coaching, therapy, and consulting. And when I tell people why I did this unusual thing of getting a dual MSW and MPP, which, side note, was my way of not going to law school, but as it turned out, it took just as long and cost just as much money. I tell people that policy and social work, the skills that I developed across those two fields are really useful in both. So it's both types of work are about listening carefully for what motivates people and then leveraging that to help them shift, whether that's shifting systems or shifting policy or shifting challenges in their emotional life. And so that's really the impact that I'm trying to have. And it's why I care a lot about influence. None of this happens without people and influencing people. So, a little bit more about me, and then I want to hear about you. As Amy introduced me, my name is Mollie Stephens. I run a practice called Matter Collaborative that is multi-armed, including coaching, therapy, and consulting. I help mission-driven people navigate career, organizational, and emotional challenges through coaching, consulting, and therapy, so that they can really focus on what matters to them. My top five strengths in Strength Finder are relator, empathy, discipline, strategic, and arranger. So I think you can see that across my practice. It's all about building ecosystems and working with people. And I feel so fortunate to be in work that helps me blend those. I'm a Luskin alum, and I teach a careers focused course to policy, social work, and urban planning graduate students. This will be my, I think, fifth year doing that virtually from across the country. And that's really my way of pouring back into this community and supporting each successive generation of leaders to make change in the world. I live in Durham, but I'm staying out of the Duke UNC rivalry for now. I just tell people I'm a Bruin and I care a lot about equity, education, and helping people sustain balance in their lives and careers because I think that is what is needed for the future. And it feels like the place where I want to put my influence. As naive as it sounds, I'm just trying to make the world a better place every day. So now I want to know a little bit about you that'll help me make sure that what I'm sharing today is relevant. And so Sarah, I think, is going to launch one poll that'll help me understand um, who in here manages a team. You know, we're talking about managing up, across, and down. So do you manage a team? Do you aspire to manage a team? Or do you just want to be responsible for me, myself, and I? Um, so we'll give people a second to answer that. And then Sarah, I'll let you move on to the next poll once we have enough responses. Okay, so I can see the responses. About half of you manage a team, another portion of you aspire to, and I love my individual contributors. Trust me, I managed a team of 19, and it was both the honor of my life and the biggest amount of work of my life. And so my next question is, I just want to get a pulse check on how you're feeling about influence. So Sarah, you can put that one up now. Are you walking into the session today feeling like your influence is strong? Is it something you're working on? Is it something you're really struggling with? All responses are valid and safe. And I'm eager to hear. Great. Working on it. I think working on influence is a lifelong project. And for some of us, and in some situations, it's really hard. So I wanted everybody here to see this also to let you know that you're not alone. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with today, it's knowing that you're in good company and working through your influence. Okay. And with that, let me show you a little bit about where we are going today. So just welcomed you. We did some reflection. I'm going to invite you to do one more short reflection, and then I'm going to get into some really actionable tools. This could be a whole masterclass on influencing all directions. And so what I've tried to do today is choose if there's one tool for managing up, one tool for managing across, and one tool for managing a team or managing down in my toolkit that I want people to walk away with. These are the four. And then I'm also going to give you a bonus that I think is foundational for all of your work, really. It's my working preferences guide that'll help you understand your working preferences. It is a tool you can share with people you work with and have really rich conversations to help smooth your work. Then we're going to do a little case consultancy or a case study, and then I will share some opportunities to continue this work, plus the bonus, and we'll do some Q&A. So, without further ado, my practice is a very reflective one. I'm going to ask you to take a breath. I'm going to play some music, And we'll spend 2 minutes just in individual reflection. You can either journal or I welcome you again to put a short response in the chat. So pick one of these questions. Where are relationships feeling stuck or draining in my work right now? What or who do I want to influence? And where is my team unclear? This will give you kind of center on your own work so that the tools I share with you today have a place to be applied. I'm going to give you a little taste of one of my favorite North Carolina songs. Maybe you saw the bright baby eyes of the chickadee there. I love that song. I hope that helped you drop into where we're going and what's relevant to you. Um, and now we're gonna hop into some tactical stuff of what can you do? What can you call upon to make change for some of the challenges that just surfaced in that reflection. So, here's a little preview. Got a check-in template for you, a framework called a MOCA, and a clarity audit. And the first one is something I'm sure you've thought about before. There are lots of versions out there of check-in agendas, but first and foremost, what is managing up? Here's how I define it. Strategically communicating your impact and building influence in every interaction. I think in this context, we're going to talk about managing up to your direct manager, but really managing up is where your influence goes up across the organization. Um, this happens all over in your working relationship with your manager, but the primary place that I hope it is happening, and if it's not, hopefully next week it will, is in your check-ins. Now, I know that check-ins vary wildly across organizations and organizational cultures, but I really want to encourage you to try to carve out regular check-ins, right? Like this is a place to build relationship and really exercise your managing up. And so the template that I'm sharing with you here is an example of how to do this well. Um, I was once told by a manager who I worked for many years, who had very different lived experience and identity than I did, that I should write a book on managing up, which I took as a great compliment. And it's why I love working with clients on how to be effective in managing up and leveraging their influence up. And I really credit strong managing up to one of the primary team reasons that my team was so successful. And identity here is really key in managing up, right? This is a close relationship with someone else who may be very different than you. And so this is why I think building self-awareness of your style and like a good coach once told my team, like what is your stuff that you bring to work and what is other people's stuff is really important to spend some time thinking about in your work, and you can't control other people's stuff, especially when they're bringing a lot to work, but you can help communicate to them what you need in relationship and how you can adjust to each other. So if there's one thing I want you to walk away with from, this about managing up is that you have an opportunity to be solutions oriented and reduce friction in managing up. I think we often can get a little lazy and fall into the trap of letting our check-ins just be a list of questions that we're bringing to our manager. But in your check-in and in your manager relationship, you really have the opportunity to be someone who brings to them solutions, reduces friction, makes things easier in their work. Anyone can point out problems and ask their manager to solve a problem for them. But if you make your orientation one of being solutions oriented and reducing friction, you are already in the mindset of working better to influence others. Um, so I invite you to, I'm not going to walk through this actual template, but I think what it gives you is a structure to pull a level up in your check-ins from just a list of questions that you have for your manager to what are the big rocks? What are the big goals that we are trying to work on and centering those in your conversations. You can handle little questions in other formats, in chat and email, but really your live check-in time, I think is the biggest tip I have for managing up is to use that on the big stuff. And also including in that check-in um, something that you did really well or your team did really well in the last week and something that's a challenge or a blocker. This helps lift up to your manager where they need to be exercising their influence. And also, if you keep this running list of the things that are successes and wins for your team and the things that are challenges, you've got your performance evaluation halfway drafted already, right? Last year I kept that running list all year and then I was able to put into our, private proprietary version of AI and ask it for themes so I could bring that into my performance review. So again, I think the key here is making sure that in your check-ins, you're using a format that gives your manager the big rocks, the big stories, and your wins to be able to share things out, not just your problems. So being solutions oriented. All right, I'm going to move us on to the next one. Now we're going to talk about managing across. And again, I hope we will answer some questions and really get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff during our Q&A. Managing across, this one I think is perhaps the most difficult to put your finger on, influencing your peers. But, reckoning back to the beginning of our presentation when we talked about the structure of organizations, you really need the support and influence of people who you don't know well, don't have formal authority over to get things done. The best ideas die without the support and influence of peers. This is group projects brought into adult life, and I know some of us really don't enjoy group projects, but I think there are ways to smooth this in organizations, and this tool is the most basic one I want to introduce to you if you or your organization or team are not using a framework like a MOCA to make roles on projects clear. I think it is one of the best tools that you could start with for exercising influence across. I had a reputation in my last role for managing across well. I was once told I was the most determined but open-minded person that this vice president had ever met. I also liked to make everything my problem, and knew everyone. So, that there's always work to be done. But, there are lots of things you could do to influence peers. Like I said, the one I want to hone in on today is bringing you this framework called a MOCA, which makes clear at the outset of a project whose role is what. And so that stands for the manager of the project, the owner of the project, who should be consulted, who are actually helpers in getting things done, and who is the ultimate approver. When we don't make this clear at the outset of a project, it becomes very difficult to work across peers, and even more difficult and layered, right, when we introduce identity, power and privilege, seniority. And so having everyone on the same page and having transparency and visibility into a MOCA or kind of a role system, I think can really help smooth the friction that we sometimes feel influencing across. And so, there should always be one owner, right? That's another pitfall that we fall into, or that, makes it really difficult to influence across when there isn't clear roles and clear authority. So I'd love you to think about taking this to your team or to your manager. It can also just be a tool just for you to try to see if you have clarity in your relationships and your work with your peers. I know this kind of a tool could be a lot for some organizational cultures, and um, you know, it could be, maybe this is not the right time to introduce this, but you can use this for yourself. Again, be solutions oriented, be someone who wants to reduce friction. The web link, I think, is in the slide, but perhaps Amy or Sarah, you could help me out by dropping that into the chat. And that'll take you to a resource on the Management Center's website. I should have mentioned this earlier. I'm a big fan of the Management Center. They have wonderful tools that are free and resources that are free. So dig around in their website if you're looking for stuff like this. They also run workshops and offer coaching. But I think great place to go for pieces like this to help smooth your work. Okay. We've talked about managing up. We've talked about managing across. Now we'll talk about managing down, so managing teams. Um, and this content I think is relevant even if you don't manage other people. The more you know, the better you can do from any position. So again, so many elements of thinking about managing a team to choose from when talking about how to move and shift your influence. When I started managing, I felt like I needed to have a philosophy and I didn't have one. And really being a new manager, or honestly being an experienced manager, feels like jumping or swimming in the deep end sometimes. But I think one place to start thinking about how can I better manage down or better influence down is working with this idea of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which swirls around us in the working world and outside of work these days. And thinking about how we as managers or leaders can bring clarity within the context of VUCA. So to give us a little exposure to that, I'm actually going to play a short video from a very renowned leader. I will give you the caveat that in this context, he's talking about the context of doing work within the military. But I think that what he shares here is relevant across sectors. So this is about 2 minutes, and then I'll bring us back and introduce us to a clarity audit. And please hop in the chat if you can't hear well.
A number of years ago, when I was spending time at the U.S. Army War College, where I got a degree in strategic studies and strategic leadership, one of the concepts I was introduced to and became fascinated by.
Whoop.
A number of years ago, when I was spending time, leaders had to operate in what we call the VUCA world. VUCA is an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now you throw those words together and you say, what? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Volatile represents what we do in the military. And the concept at the War College was that strategic leaders and senior leaders had to feel comfortable operating in the VUCA world. War, by its very nature, is volatile. It's uncertain because every time you develop a battle plan, the enemy is going to change that battle plan after the first encounter. It's complex because you're talking about everything from arms to terrain to culture to political objectives. And it's ambiguous because many times these things are rapidly changing and you get the fog of war, if you will, and it's hard to sort things out. But what was impressed upon me is that strategic leaders have got to bring that clarity to the VUCA world. They've got to see beyond the fog. They've got to define the vision. They've got to define the end state. Now, if you're a good strategic leader, you help define that end state and you clearly communicate it, but you don't tell your talented crew how to get there. You empower them, enable them to use every bit of their ingenuity, every bit of their intellect, every bit of their talent to design the tactical approach to getting to that end state, that vision, that optimal state of being or operating.
So I feel inspired just watching that. I'm like, oh man, I would love a leader to follow a leader like that. So how can we as humble leaders bring some clarity to our teams? Um, I wanted to introduce you to just a very simple framework for doing that. It's a clarity audit. There's no link to this because it's just a set of questions that you can bring to your team. You know, we can't bring certainty to our teams, but as leaders, we can bring clarity. And this is a great way to improve or increase your influence of your team. And the first thing to do that, to understand clarity and bring clarity to them, is to do an audit and illuminate where you need to be more clear on central parts of the work with the team or at the individual level. So I'll put into the chat these questions and I'll also read them out loud. These are things you could do in a team meeting or in individual check-ins, checking for understanding and clarity with your team. First of all, what's our purpose? Why do we exist? What are our team goals? What are we collectively working towards achieving? What are our team priorities? What are the most important things for us to focus on now? And what are the individual goals? How does your role contribute to the team's success? And what are the expectations of your role? And I will tell you, in my work, and I have heard other leaders say when they do this exercise, they always discover places where they as leaders have not given sufficient clarity to their teams. So these questions, the idea of doing a clarity audit will surface for you where you need to be more clear to influence your team. And since, identity is also central here, I wanted to bring that into talking about doing a clarity audit and managing teams. And I think the best thing you can do as a leader there is to ask yourself, is this expectation I'm setting, or is this preference, this thing I'm trying to bring clarity on, is this a preference of mine based on my working style, my experience, my identity, my communication style? Or is this the requirement? And if it is a requirement, how do I make that clear to my team? And I think the bonus I'm going to give you, the working styles worksheet, can help you do some of that reflective work to understand, if I'm coming from dominant society, I am bringing preferences in and calling them requirements when really they are just preferences. And I see the question in the chat. The managing up framework is the idea of doing a really great check-in where you're not just going through a list of problems and questions for your manager, but you are using that space to influence up and having conversations about goals, challenges, successes, wins, and lifting up to them the stories that need to be told at the organizational level. So, folks, those are the 3 tools that I wanted to introduce today. I feel we could talk much longer on all of these things, but I want the opportunity with a little bit of time we have left before our Q&A to get hands-on. In my coaching work, I often do small group work where we do case consultancies and folks bring to the group, here's a challenge I'm facing, and we use a structure like that's on the slide today. We're not going to do that today since we have such a big group and limited time, but we are going to do a short case study. And so I'm going to read this case study to you all and ask you in the chat, how might you use some of the tools that we've talked about to influence up, across, or down? So imagine You are on a team of 14 people in a mid-sized professional firm. Over the last 2 quarters, your team has delivered really strong results, but the cost is visible, and two high performers have quietly shared with you that they're looking elsewhere. Sick days are up, and the last employee survey showed that workload sustainability scored pretty low, a 4.2 out of 10. And your manager has just told you that the company is launching a new client engagement model next quarter that will add roughly 20% more work to everyone's plate with no new headcount. As a long-serving team member managing the team, your manager expects your full support. This may sound all too real to some of you, and so I want to invite you to drop into the chat. How might you use or leverage one of the tools that we've talked about today to influence up, down, or across in this situation? And remember, the tools are a really powerful check-in template, the idea of a MOCA that makes roles clear on projects, or doing a clarity audit. What comes to mind? What would you do in this situation? MOCA. Natalie says she would leverage a MOCA. I assume to make sure that people's roles are clear as there's new work coming. I like it. Other thoughts? Clarity audit. Clarity audit, thinking about VUCA, making sure that everyone understands the why of the work. I love that because that really, people, not all people, but some people really need to understand the why to motivate and build buy-in. That's awesome. Um, and I will say, if it were me also, I would bring to my check-in agenda some solutions about how we could navigate through these challenges and make sure I'm naming for my manager, here are the trade-offs. If we take on 20% more work, here is where I propose that we find that from, and here is what we need to do in order to sustain the culture on this team. I hope a little bit of applied work was helpful. We're going to skip the reflection for today, even though I love a reflection, but I want to make sure we have time for questions. So if you liked this, if this was useful and enjoyable for you, I wanted to share with you a few opportunities to deepen the work. You have my contact information here, and we will also put that in the chat. I actually launched a brand new website just this week, so I'd love you to hop on there and poke around. And I have some upcoming opportunities, small cohorts. I'm always here for individual coaching as well. But in particular, I have a small cohort called Mattering in the Middle, where we are going to do more applied work on these topics, right? Like if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the challenges you are facing with influence, this is a great place to do this. And it's really powerful and fun and validating to do this in a small group of peers. Also, a great way to get coaching at a lower cost point. So, in Mattering in the Middle, it will be a safe space to work on what's going on with your boss, your peers, without turning to your friends, your partner, etc., with those challenges. And then Get a Job That Matters is a small cohort for folks who are looking really to kick their job search in the pants. This is a really hard market. And so having a space to be accountable for the things you need to do really, I think, is helpful in landing what's next. I will give you lots of job search tools. You will walk away with a refined brand, a job search and networking plan, a revamped LinkedIn, and a group of peers to find support with. So I have a discount code for UCLA alums. You can see on the slide, it's Alum Matters. And but really, I welcome you to reach out if these offerings are of interest. I don't want cost to ever be a barrier. So if that is on your mind, we will work something out. And then here's the bonus that I promised you. This is one of my favorite tools. This is the Working Styles worksheet is a set of questions that you can use individually or in relationship with someone else on your team to surface your working styles. You'll go through things like, I do my best work when X, Y, and Z happens. My productivity suffers when X, Y, Z happens. Here's how I would like to receive feedback. So on this slide, there is a QR code for a short survey to fill that out, and then I will send you that worksheet. And with that, I welcome any and all questions through Amy.
Fabulous, Molly. Thank you so much. While we transition to the Q&A portion with Molly, please take a few minutes to fill out our feedback survey. The information you provide does help us determine future topics and programming, so we take your feedback very, very seriously. Thank you so much for taking a moment to fill that out for us. If you have any questions for Molly, please submit them via the Q&A function at the bottom. We're going to start off with some questions that were sent in advance. Molly, you want to go ahead and stop sharing?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, there we go. Now we see you. Okay, let's start with one that actually probably a lot of people are working through. How to overcome authority anxiety, right? Childhood trauma. Don't ask. Don't, right? All of it.
Yes.
All of that.
Yes. I loved seeing this question come through because this is exactly the work that I do with my clients. And so, how I wanted to give you a sense of how I would process this question in coaching or therapy. And then I also have some suggestions of how to do some of this work on your own. So, in coaching, thinking about authority anxiety that's maybe coming from somewhere in your history, we might do some exploration of, okay, well, what are your goals? What do you want your relationship with authority to look like? What do you want to shift in your experience of that? And then we'll create some space in coaching to try that out. Because I think, my headline there is practicing with someone who is not the authority figure is a great way to build confidence there. In therapy, we might focus on what's happening in your body as this is going on. We might do some work on some healing of the inner child and doing what I call parts work or thinking about, there's a framework called internal family systems that can help you pull some of these things apart. So the distinction there is that, there is a world in which you could process some of this in a very forward-looking way. You might also need some looking back or some deeper work, and that is work for a therapeutic space. And then on your own, right? I think that working styles worksheet that I mentioned is a way to even do some self-work and some self-reflection on what's working, what works for me in relationships that have authority, and give you a way of having that conversation with someone. Hey, here's how I would like to receive feedback. Here's what's really challenging for me in situations where there's a lot of pressure, et cetera, et cetera. I hope that's helpful.
It is. There's a follow-up question though that came through and it's on the same path. So let's go ahead and ask it. How do you get over anxiety? How do you get over anxiety or your performance differences when you speak with your manager versus your peers and direct reports?
Let me process for a second. Speaking with your manager and your behavior is different than versus peers and direct reports. It sounds like maybe there's something about the communication that's happening in the manager relationship that is making it feel like, oh, I can't communicate in a way that is comfortable, that feels authentic. And again, not to be a broken record, but I really think that working style preferences guide is a way to have that conversation with a manager that's not like, hey, you make me really uncomfortable. But it's more like, hey, I discovered, I was introduced to this tool, this working styles worksheet, and I realized we've never gotten a chance to have a conversation about what works for me and what your preferences are in your communication. Would you be open to both doing this worksheet and exchanging it? And that might create a space to explore some of that. I will say again, I have this dual training. So from a clinical standpoint, anxiety is something that really getting the support of professionals and working through is really helpful. And this is part of why I do the work that I do, because I've been coaching and supporting leaders for, almost 20 years now. And I realized that we think that therapy is just um, for personal relationships, but actually we spend a lot of our time and energy at work. And it's where a lot of the stuff surfaces. And so, again, these are the kind of challenges that I work through both in my coaching practice and in my clinical work. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I'll throw this out there if it's helpful to you. What I tend to do is I'll open up a Word doc and I will just like throw everything that I want to communicate, drop it all in there, bullet points, messy, doesn't really matter. But I do ask ChatGPT to rewrite it, organize it, make sure the tone is polite, respectful. Like I have that create the script for me, and then I can walk in with that. At least if you don't have a colleague or a peer to look over your notes, at least chat. It's pretty good for that. We'll temper the tone if nothing else. Might even suggest how you organize the themes and the way in which you go into that meeting. So if you don't have anything else available to you, that could be a good way to at least come into a conversation with your manager without being completely cold.
Hmm.
I think it helps a lot. It does me.
Yeah.
Mollie.
Real quick, I had another, that
Oh,
sparked
yeah.
another thought too, which is, I told you about my orientation as a leader and my strengths earlier. For me, I like to build a relationship with people as a way to smooth some of that anxiety too. So I know this really varies in organizational cultures, but perhaps inviting, seeing if there's an invitation to just connect and get to know that person better over coffee outside of a formal check-in or working relationship, like could break down some of that stickiness that's feeling.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yep, absolutely. All right, Mollie. What's the best way to recap your week to a supervisor or superior, but especially in remote environments where they don't see you day to day? So
Great.
sometimes you feel the need to fill in that space, right? And throw everything so that they know that you were working. It like validates you.
Yeah.
They actually get annoyed by that, but give it to us, Mollie. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I love this question. I think the check-in template I gave you is one place to do that because you're doing that proactively, right? You're naming what are the successes and challenges that have happened in the last week, and you could do an end of week version of that as well. But my main answer here is ask your manager their preference, right? Because not everything works for everyone. I've had over the course of my career, who knows how many managers, right? And everyone had a different way that they wanted to get those kinds of recaps and updates. And so just ask them. That's again, that is managing up right there. Like ask them what their preference is for receiving those recaps and updates when they want to get those in the week. For example, in my last management relationship, it was really helpful for my manager to get those updates on a Tuesday morning because that was right before she walked into her big leadership team meeting. So she would walk in prepared with all the things that her team wanted to lift up to her. So my headline there is ask your manager their preference.
Love it. On the flip side, I got a manager asking, what tips do you have for managing remote workers?
Yes, and I had the pleasure of managing a large, nationally dispersed team for many years. Headline there is build relationship, right? Like you need to be able to um not just keep track of what people are doing, but also know them. And, for some folks, working remotely can be very, very isolating and maybe they don't not talking to everyone on a daily basis. And so I think just again, this is me and my style, but finding ways to build relationship and have some fun. I know it's like cheesy, but I actually think team spaces and check-ins can be a place to um, to just like loosen it up a little bit and have fun and build a relationship. Then my other answer, which I know is not always feasible, is try to get together in person if you can, somehow, some way. I know there's not always budget for that, but I really do find that even like a couple of in-person touch points early in building a team smooths the work for years, right? Like I don't there's not, the greatest replacement ever for that. It just really accelerates relationships. So see if there's a creative way to be able to meet in person, even at least once or twice.
Excellent. I'm going to combine three questions. because
Okay.
we don't have a ton of time and they're kind of somewhat related. You'll catch on in a second. The first question is, and this question got cut off, so I'm writing the ending. I think this is what
Okay.
they meant. How do you build influence with senior stakeholders when organizational restructuring or leadership turnover has eliminated your direct relationship or access to leadership? So
Mhm.
restructuring, you're now bumped out. The second one that kind of is similar is how do you gain influence quickly when you're in a new role at a company? And right there, dovetailing it is how do you gain influence at senior leadership levels when there's a lot of politics?
Yes.
You see why those go?
I sure do. Okay, a few thoughts. One is, and this is where what I said earlier about, this dual skill set of listening for what motivates people and trying to subtly influence them comes in. Put your ears out and try to understand what projects or goals or work is most exciting to these people that you're trying to influence. What do they care about the most? Find the projects that they're excited about and see if there's a way you can get onto those, right? Like, I think this is a great relationship, great way to find your ins up the chain when there's a gap that's been created. And again, I know that's not always possible in all cultures. There isn't flexibility to get onto projects, but I also think managing up and raising your hand and saying, "Hey, I want to build XYZ skill set on this project," can really raise your profile when there are gaps in your influence and relationship up an organization. And if you can't do that, I think the other thing that we should really be intentional about is telling the story of our work across the organization in the ways that we can. I think one pitfall that folks make, perhaps early in their career and then perhaps, continue to make is just thinking that doing the work is enough. But actually, you need to have that megaphone and be able to say, "Hey, here's this awesome thing that my team did." And sometimes it feels, self-centered or whatever, but no one knows if you don't tell them. Make sure your manager has those stories at the ready. Shout out other people as well. I think this can get to the question about politics. And then for the first 90 days, I love coaching people in their first 90 days of their roles because frankly, there really is a formula for this. And no one teaches anyone, no one teaches you this. But the most important things in the first 90 days of your role are aligning with your manager and getting clear on goals and expectations, building relationships, um, and then identifying some early wins, right? Like if you can do those three things, understand what your manager is looking for and what you're going to be held accountable for, build relationships in all directions, and then demonstrate some early wins, you've really set yourself up in the first 3 months of a role for long-term success.
Love it. We got a follow-up question on that one. But before we go there, Eric, I saw your question in the chats about overcoming distance/proximity bias. If we did not cover that, or if Molly didn't give you enough insight on that, let me know. We'll try to circle back. If we don't do it on the webinar, we'll do it afterwards. I just want to make sure that that gets answered for you. Along the same lines, Molly, the first 90 days, like what you want to come in and do. We have someone who I think is probably in the earlier stage of their career. So this is perfect timing. What do you find the most common issue people have transitioning from the classroom to the workplace?
Yeah. I think honestly, being patient with how long it takes to understand a job. I think it's like I can almost clock it when I see it at the 3 month mark, people start freaking out and thinking, "Oh my God, have I made a mistake? Have I taken the wrong job? Is this going to be a disaster? I got to look for something else." And I really coach people to be patient, right? Like, especially coming out of a training program or out of school, you're so eager to get it right away, but it really takes a year in a job to be able to wrap your arms around it, build those relationships, get the clarity that we've been talking about. And so I think patience is one of the things that is the biggest, I wouldn't say a mistake, but the biggest area to keep an eye on as you're new. Or transitioning out. And There was another one I wanted to name. Oh, just, confidence and communication. And I think, being able to bring solutions and not just problems. And again, these are things that confidence is a thing we can really work on in coaching and in small groups as well.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny. I teach a class for our new grads, and I tell them the same thing. I don't tell them the 3 month mark. That is when it starts to feel uncomfortable. It's the 6 month mark when they actually start looking.
Yeah.
Why would you
I
do
tell
that
them,
to, why
take
would
a
you do
year.
that to
Please
yourself?
take a year. Yeah.
So if you're new, here's the thing, especially if it's your first time working in a professional setting, there is no such thing as work-life balance year one. You are learning the job, the company, the clients, the product, the services, the politics, the passwords, where the bathroom is, the names of your colleagues. You're seeing the first year for the first time.
Hmm.
You have no idea what that's going to feel like, but it's going to feel like a lot. I can tell you that. And it's going to take
Yes.
a minute before it really settles in. And you're still getting to know personalities, the way things are done. Mollie's right with the thing about being patient. And then kind of year two, you might go, oh, I can do this. I'm ready for the next thing. But have you built proficiency?
Hmm.
That's the question. And proficiency takes time. So yeah, you can do it fast, but it's the proficiency that's actually going to get you the promotion and the big bucks, I would
I
say.
couldn't agree more. And I also think starting a new role gives you an opportunity to reset on things. And so I really
Yeah,
encourage people to take some time as they're starting a new role, to be really intentional about what are the things I want to carry with me from the past, and what are the things that I might want to shift. This is a place where you can shift, reputation, boundaries, etc. So, but all of that stuff takes time, and I think, we get antsy and we want it to feel comfortable fast, and I tell people try to reserve judgment for a year.
absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, join me in thanking Mollie for being here with us today. I want to take this moment to thank each and every one of you who have joined us and invite you to next month's webinar, Thriving in the Gap, how to make the most of a survival job without getting stuck, meaning it's not your dream job, but it's paying the bills. How do you navigate that so you don't get stuck there? Join us next month with Markel Morris, career coach, on Wednesday, May 13th at noon. We will see you here. Thank you so much, Mollie. We'll send the recording out. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll see you next month.